Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Analytica LinkedIn Live series. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by Tom Simpson, who's a customer advocacy program manager at Cisco, and I'm especially delighted today because this is part of our customer chat series, and we talk a lot about influence marketing and employee advocacy. And actually, there's a really wonderful use case of how to leverage influencers through customer advocacy. So, a very warm welcome to you, Tom. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, great to be here, and really looking forward to our chat.
Great. So just before we kick off, would be great to hear a bit of the background about how you got into customer advocacy in the first place.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've always worked in tech, and I began my career in product marketing here at Cisco, and then after working with that team out in the region in EMEA, I moved on to a global role with the global advocacy team. So we look after global advocacy, so across all regions for customer stories, references, and kind of the main part that I've been looking after is around communities and influence as well. And I sort of started out in the data analytics side of the house, but I've moved into a more of a strategy role, and some of the kind of pilots that we've been doing, especially the one with Analytica, around how we can kind of mix the two of customer advocacy and influencer marketing into a sort of storytelling kind of machine, as it were.
Yeah, and I'd love to dig into that, in much more detail because that's truly fascinating. Just to sort of step back for 1 second, why should brands be running customer advocacy programs? I mean, what are the advantages of it, and what are the sort of key benefits that you're seeing through the whole program?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I think your customer advocates are your sort of secret weapon as a brand in some ways. They're people who want to position themselves with your brand for free. They want to do that because they've had such a great experience with your brand, and leveraging them in a really positive way can yield some great results. Especially when it comes down to the kind of either connecting them with influencers, but more importantly, just within a community. We started a community called The Gateway about 6 years ago, and that's grown now into a kind of larger community called Cisco Insider Advocates. And we've got people in there who are, every day they're in there talking to each other, sharing sort of product feedback, and they're a real asset to us. I also think it's a kind of actual way to practice what you preach, in the sense of being customer focused. They can kind of leverage that authenticity, as it were, or authentic storytelling, essentially. It's a great way to position your brand in a way that it's not the brand telling the story, it's your customers, or it's essentially third parties who kind of bring that credibility in some ways. I kind of think about it like if you need a babysitter, if someone gives you a reference that they're a good babysitter, probably that's going to help you make a decision on that. And that's sort of how we use our customer advocates in some ways. They're talking on our behalf, and they really have that authenticity and credibility.
Yeah, I think that's everyone's dream, isn't it? To create that army of content creators who are your customers, evangelizing the word of mouth. And it seems that, I've been very impressed with Cisco's customer advocacy program. So it seems like you're obviously doing a lot of things, right and very well. I'd love to kind of unpick the journey a bit about how you got there. I mean, can you talk a bit about how many customer advocates you have? And you said you started it 6 years ago. So how did it evolve? Like so what was the program like in year one? How did you find the acceleration? What were the kind of challenges along the way?
Yeah, that's a great point, and actually quite timely. We had a review today, and part of that review was thinking about that whole journey. I need to say that I wasn't in the team 6 years ago. I mean, it was Christina Maluzzi and Valerio Batelli in our team who've been leading from the start and still here to this day, and really being pioneers, essentially. But I mean, the sort of the origins of the program were really community based. How can we bring in people who are very passionate about our technology, or sort of what we do from a branding perspective, and trying to bring them into a community of like-minded peers, to connect with each other, share their feedback, really hear them. But it was a small pilot at first, just based in one region, a pilot using Influitive as the technology that we use, essentially creating that gateway community that I spoke about. And from there, it's just been a kind of evolution, different challenges along the way, definitely. Trying to expand to other regions. We brought in an APJC community, and then subsequently an Americas community, and trying to bring all those regions together under one sort of roof definitely has its challenges. But that's been a great evolution. And then also sort of building on top of that, you've got the sort of community side of customer advocacy, but then also the storytelling and reference side. That's a huge piece for Cisco. When you read about some of our customers' experience with us, I think during COVID, there were some great case studies produced, and there've been lots. One recently with the NFL. Those types of things are they're really impactful because you've got someone telling the story on your behalf. So I think it's been a long journey. Some challenges, I suppose, as you grow a kind of an organization or a program, especially in a company as large as Cisco, that challenge between kind of making sure that you are innovative, but at the same time having processes in place that kind of work, that's definitely a challenge that we're always figuring out. But we've got great team members everywhere, very passionate advocate marketeers. I think advocate marketeers are very passionate people in general, and they love putting the customer first, definitely.
Yeah, I suppose if you're in a communications role, it's important that you have the biggest energy when you're running the programs. And I guess when you've got the customer advocates, they can share case studies, but you also talked about storytelling and thought leadership, and I imagine what you talked about just at the beginning, and what we're working on is trying to link up customer advocacy and influence marketing, or leveraging influencers as part of your customer advocacy program. So can you just tell us a bit about how you do that at Cisco, and some of your observations?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think sort of connecting our customer advocates with influencers is probably almost the next evolution of where we've gone to in kind of quite a quick sort of succession. It's almost the next nexus of authenticity, in the sense that even when we create a case study, I mean, Cisco's kind of in the room in some sense, or it's posted on our sort of cisco.com pages or our promotion. Whereas when you really let the conversation shift to a customer and an influencer talking to each other, I mean, Cisco's not in the room in some ways, but that means that it even has that sort of authenticity even more. But I suppose the storytelling element is also a kind of an innovation as well. We need to think of new, interesting ways to tell stories about customers. It's not the sort of previous times when it would have been just a blog or just a kind of white paper of the key results. There are always new and innovative ways, even Instagram kind of reels, really sort of short snippets of ways of telling that story. And I think kind of influencer marketing within that mix has been hugely beneficial. We had an example with some security, cybersecurity work that we did, and that kind of had a whole sort of ecosystem package to it, with sort of blogs, video case studies, like white papers, web pages, and also influencer marketing, where so you hit so many different touch points, and the influencers, a really big part of that.
Yeah, and that's really, really cool to hear. And I guess it gives you less control when the customers are speaking to influencers, because they're having those conversations outside of what you say, the Cisco own channel. But what we say is that the kind of lack of control increases the trust element. So it's like a controlled trust axis. Is that how you view it, or are there challenges when it comes to customers speaking to influencers, and you not being able to really curate the content, or do you enable them to speak to each other and then curate the content, so you've got the kind of elements of trust and control in terms of how you publish the content and promote it?
I mean, that's a great question. I think kind of brand reputation and all those sort of ideas are always a challenge, especially for large brands. But I think the kind of community that we've built now, they're really passionate people about Cisco's brand. So we also have that trust in them, in the sense that we know that they want to share their story in a positive way. And also, I think honestly, them bringing about some challenges that they might have had is also like really useful, because no one's going into a buying decision. They're all aware that there might be some challenges along the way, or they have some pain points which they need to overcome. So I think that actually makes it even more authentic. I think where we've seen the most engagement is often where it's like about some challenges that they faced and how they overcame them from a technology standpoint. But yeah, you're right. It's challenging to make sure that it's still a really positive and sort of credible piece of content. But again, I think it's really about selecting the influencers that you work with, people who are also passionate about your technology, or at the very least, people who are passionate about the sort of space in general. And then, leaving the customers to tell their story, because there's only so much that you really want to kind of craft a customer story. Like their sides to it, their kind of perspective is probably the most important thing. And they have such interesting stories to tell. And I think kind of humanizing it as well, in the sense that it's not just a business, or it's not just some solutions. It's about the person. Our security team did some really cool case studies recently, all about the kind of hero, the cybersecurity hero, the sort of unsung hero, I suppose, the people who are behind closed doors, who they do all the amazing work to keep people's offices running or schools running from a cybersecurity perspective. So putting the focus back on the user themselves, or the person, is great, and we can do that when we work with influencers.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really cool to hear. And I just think that it's really great to see that you let that conversation happen. And I think that the interesting thing about what you said was that some of the challenges are you get the most engagement, and actually everyone thinks that when you create thought leadership and content, it has to be about the vision and what works really well. But actually, a lot of people have constraints in their role, and they love hearing about the challenges. And obviously, as you say, that the authentic conversation between a customer and an influencer that don't have any particular objective other than to get to the solution. And so I can see that working extremely well for you. So clearly the program's going very, very well. How is it viewed by senior management when they listen to your customer advocacy program, influencer marketing? Do they get it? Especially when you start introducing influencers, how have the conversations been with educating senior management? Because it's a big challenge in influencer marketing when program managers are speaking to senior management. I imagine customer advocacy is probably a bit of an easier sell to senior management.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably just kind of maturity in some ways, in the sense of there's probably more maturity in our customer advocacy programs because they started sort of earlier. And you've had that sort of longer time of education. But it's an ongoing challenge. But you're right. I mean, customer advocacy is definitely more in the marketing mix, and viewed really positively by senior leadership. I think it has a sort of a double side to it, in the sense of the kind of brand, more intangible side to it. When we talk about communities and putting that focus on the advocate and giving them the best possible experience, it has that sort of more emotional side to it, which I think senior leadership do like in many ways. That kind of, is a great story to tell when you really focus in on one person. But the flip side to that is when you look at customer stories, and especially references, I mean, that's something that you can tie to revenue and pipeline really well. You know that where references were used in a deal, it often speeds up the sales cycle. Or where references were used in a deal, that deal is X% larger as a result of that. And pretty much there are no deals really where there won't be a reference sort of somewhere involved in the way, or they won't have looked for some proof points or a case study. So showing that impact on ultimately revenue is really important, and that's kind of the bottom line from senior leadership. So being able to do that with our customer advocacy programs is that's a game changer. I think probably the influencer piece has a bit of a way to go in that sense, because it is more challenging, because it's a kind of content creation side rather than necessarily influencing sales in that direct way. That said, though, I mean, the kind of influencer conversations that we've had, that's the type of thing that we can give to sellers and say, look, you can share this with your prospect because they might have similar kind of pain points to this customer that we worked with, or they've had some really interesting solutions that you might be thinking about. But ultimately, I'd say like kind of tying whatever you're doing back to senior management goals or KPIs is like the best thing that you can do, in the sense that it could be your marketing organization, or even larger than that, just the organization as a whole. If what you're doing and the results that you get from that align to their ultimate goals, then you pretty much hit the jackpot. That should be the sort of starting point, I think, or at least the one of your big aims. How can I take what I've done and the sort of KPIs there and align them to what I know senior leadership are interested in driving, and generally, in large organizations that might be revenue and growth. If you can align what you're doing to those two topics, you're definitely on a good start.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting what you said. And I'm actually doing a LinkedIn Live soon about selling the business case into social media. Sorry, selling business case to senior management about social media programs. And so it's obviously pretty easy if you can show that it's going to affect pipeline conversion and increase revenue on that. When it comes to inspiring content, I guess it's the ability for you to arm your sales team and to get it in front of prospects so that you can use the same kind of metrics as an extension of your customer advocacy program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think that connection with sales, again, just from my experience in large organizations, is really important. Even in the kind of community aspect of that, like making sure that the sellers know, that their customer is in the community, they're interested. Like you can have almost more of a one-to-one connection when it's in a community, because sometimes it's informal. They could be just doing interesting things. Like, I don't know, we might send them just a random kind of note to say happy birthday or whatever. But you have that kind of informal relationship, but also probably opens the doors for them to share some really interesting topics, and then you can bring that back to sellers. That kind of tight-knit relationship with the sales team is, I think, if you've got that dialed in, you're doing really well.
Yeah, and in terms of the actual tactics of your program and how you link up the customer advocates with influencers, because you've got basically, as part of the work that we're doing together, you're offering e-learning, aren't you, to enable them to become more influential actually as an individual. And then there's the ability to have certain masterclasses or influence activation. Can you just speak a bit about how they kind of qualify for the different stages and how you build the culture of the kind of benefits from their perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was the kind of the sort of the other side to the social media and influencer activations that we've done, which is we knew that we had a large base of customers, like as in we have 30,000 people in one of our customer communities, which is Cisco Inside Advocates. And they do a lot of sharing on social media, resharing our content and things like that. And we wanted to kind of up level that in the sense of making sure that, when they are sharing it, that actually they're sharing it to an even more engaged audience, that they go from having X number of followers to now they've got these really engaged followers who want to see their content, and kind of taking the cream of the crop of that group and almost turning them into content creators themselves. So we went through a kind of evolution of doing some e-learnings. So essentially taking them through I think that there were 10 modules of some really basic stuff for the more the less advanced people on social media, and then some sort of more advanced stuff. But it could be making sure that your bio has the right hashtags in, or you're following the right kind of topics or the right kind of influencers, and sort of up leveling our customer advocates into people who are really engaged on social media, especially when you're in a more technical role as well. You've got a lot of people who are IT professionals or networking managers, those kind of things. And probably social media in the past, at least, hasn't been one of their top priorities. But now we've positioned it in a way where it is a priority for them, because also it's a way for them to build their own brand. And we have seen advocates, move into a new company or get a more senior role as a result of what they've been sharing about Cisco or sort of through the community. So I think they can see the value there as well. but primarily it's about us giving them the best possible experience. They do a huge amount for us in terms of advocating for us. So we want to make sure they have a fantastic experience. So the more learning and education we can provide them, the better.
Yeah, what I love about that is that it does have a real community sense. I mean, I know that people talk about community, but you hear community, 5 times a week. But sometimes people are just talking about it, not really doing that. And you're looking almost so far ahead in terms of helping them develop their brand presence, so that when they go to another organization, they're going to be even more influential. And I guess what you're doing, what I think in a really smart way, is you're not only getting the references to be able to improve the pipeline conversion, but you're also developing the social media influence now and for many years to come, as like an additional communication channel to drive engagement, which will drive impact as well, on a continuous basis.
Definitely. I mean, the people in the community are really the engine, if you like. They're people who you want to nurture. You want to make sure they have a fantastic experience, and you don't want to ask too much of them, because that's not really what they're there for necessarily. They're there because they're interested in the content that's shared, or they're interested in interacting with peers. But the ask isn't that much. That we just want them to be there because they want to. And then when it comes down to speaking at an event, for example, or joining a reference call, then the guys who are really engaged, then they're the people that you go to and you make that ask. And if they want to, they do it. And 9 times out of 10, they do, because they're really passionate about the about the brand. And what you mentioned in terms of sort of brand building for them, personal brand building, I mean, if you look at the sort of typical maturity models of an advocacy program, one of the final kind of tick boxes of a really mature program is that your reward kind of aspect is, it's intangible rewards, as in it's sort of, a way of building their career progression or their personal brand. It's not giving them an e-gift card or something like that. They're really there because they get a huge amount of value personally, not something that's a kind of carrot approach.
Yeah, so something which is less finite. It's just indefinite, infinite, just feeling of loyalty.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then when it comes down to working with influencers, I mean, we've never had someone say no to want to work with an influencer, because that's I mean, I'm doing it now, I suppose. It's quite an interesting and great experience to go on somewhere and like build your personal brand, or just sort of be in the conversation around a certain topic. And they love to do that. It's great for them personally. It's also great for their company in some ways as well. So it's a sort of win-win-win. Cisco wins, the advocate definitely wins, and the influencer gets something out of it as well from working with a new brand or whatever it might be. So I think, it's been a really exciting project working with you guys on that.
Well, great. I mean, it obviously fantastic to be working with you as well on it. And what some of my observations have been is that when you work with, say, a marketing program manager that has an event or a campaign, they're looking for that for those quick wins. Within 10 to 12 weeks, they're looking to get that engagement. If they're working with influencers, they want the content to perform the highest that it ever has done. What you're doing is you're working with community, and you're thinking about the individuals in the community first, and actually that means that you can really make it about them, so that you're going to get far more benefit, maybe 3 to 6 months down the line, rather than going for that big win within a couple of weeks. So it feels less programmatic. It feels much more about the community feel, but actually you're going to get so much more return, and they're going to see the impact it has on other people, and it's very scalable as well. So I love the fact that it is a community based upon relationships, and you're providing those intangibles rather than putting up a KPI every time, when you're giving benefit, to be able to have that sort of short-term mindset, which a lot of people get trapped within.
Definitely. And honestly, I think that comes from leadership. Like I mentioned, Valeria Patelli and Christina. That's something that they fostered, in the sense of really putting the customer first. They are not there to just drive results like for the business. They're there because they're really important to us as customers, first of all, but as people as well. And some of the people who are our biggest rock stars, we call them, our top advocates. They've been there for 6 years, and they pretty much go in and engage with the community on a daily basis. It's literally a daily habit for them, which is like quite amazing, actually, when you think about that. And we've met them in person multiple times at different events, and it is building that personal relationship. And they're still choosing Cisco 6 years later, and I think being in a community has a sort of a big impact on that. Again, it's the community side is slightly more intangible in the sense of you can't say exactly because you're in this community that you do keep buying Cisco, but certainly there's a kind of there's a correlation there. And the community aspect is it's so important. That's really the engine for all the things that you need to do. And when you do need someone to feature in a case study or a reference, they're the people who want to be there.
Great. No, it sounds amazing, especially the kind of daily commenting from customer advocates. I think that would be what everyone would like. I wanted to ask you a bit about, you said that there are 30,000 insider advocates within the Cisco, within your Cisco brand. How many of those do you think have impressive social media presence and are social media active?
I think it's a I don't know the exact figure, but I'd say towards it'd be the smaller group that were really the ones who are active on social media, and that was kind of part of our initial work in terms of doing the e-learning, is trying to expand that group, especially because if someone's got almost no following on social media, if they're sharing our content, it's not going to have an effect as much. So you may as well sort of find different ways of them to engage in the community. I think if you're sort of working with marketing professionals, for example, that might be slightly easier. So, for example, we work also with our partner advocates. A lot of them are partner marketers, and they are much more engaged on social media. It's a smaller community, but they have a really high rate of engagement on social media. Whereas the kind of IT manager and customer persona is slightly more difficult. But we've seen some really some people with some really amazing followings and growing, especially the ones who've been involved with influencers. As a result of that, they've got more followers. Now I can see them sort of commenting on things more, sharing their own content, even creating their own content, which is really exciting. And hopefully it keeps going from there.
Yeah, because I suppose the program's been 6 years running, and this can only grow, because in 10 years time we're obviously going to see a significantly higher proportion of of those people on social media. I know that we're tracking, I think, 2,000 customer advocates for you as part of our program, so it's still a significant proportion. It's not 30,000, but but we wouldn't be surprised if that was maybe 50% of them were significantly on social media in the next, say, 3 or 4 years, 3 or 4 or 5 years on that. So I think it's really interesting over time to be able to obviously see how those change. You can say that the ones that are engaging with influencers, is great to see that they've increased their following and engagement, and obviously that will motivate other people to start engaging with influencers, and then you'll see more and more people moving into the different buckets of your program, I suppose, or different categories of what you're offering them.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. We have seen that kind of evolution of people moving from sort of slightly to no engagement to, now you do see them engaging much more. And all it requires is, putting up some e-learning for them. Investing in that relationship, in the sense of saying, I really want you to be able to market yourself in a really positive way, or have some new skills even. It could be really new, something new for someone. So it takes that investment, and then you'll see the rewards, as you said, in time. But you need to be customer focused. If you're just focused on the conversion side of things in the short term, that kind of relationship might burn out quite quickly, or you'll over ask for someone and they won't want to do things. Whereas when you invest in the relationship, they'll be asking you to do stuff like, I really want to feature in a case study, or I really want to work with an influencer. So I think we've got that piece right, I think.
And in terms of the training that the customer advocates need, I mean, clearly, and we talk about it, ourselves and our partner Tribal Impact as well, talk about the different employee personas and the different influencer personas. So everyone's different, right? But have you seen some common areas of training for social media that the customer advocates need or are most interested in?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think it's about like who to follow, in the sense of finding really interesting people to follow, because from there you'll then like come across content, and that might encourage them to engage because they're interested in that content. But that's really the first bit. Sort of, go and follow 3 to 5 people who you think might be interesting. It could be in business or in technology or sustainability or whatever it might be. But following those people first and then seeing that content, I think there are a lot of people who aren't there yet in terms of creating their own content. That's quite a skill in some ways, or it does require some investment from your side. So we're really trying to build a kind of a large mass of people who are interested in commenting, liking, sharing, maybe even posting their own stuff as well. They're not quite those content creators yet, but they're definitely engaged on social media.
Great. No, I think that's really interesting. It does align to what we're seeing, that some people haven't sorted out their profile, but most people, have now got, pretty much a decent profile, maybe with some optimizations, but then they might not feel comfortable with posting content, straight off the bat. So commenting, liking, sharing, but knowing what content to actually comment on, so it's a good use of time, is a very good place to start. So so I can imagine that would benefit a lot of people. And there's just so much content out there, right? And the social networks sometimes control your feeds, according to who you're following. So I think being able to dive into a topic and knowing who the 3 to 5 people or 10 to 15 people are, and focusing on them, is a smart move. And I know we talked a lot about measurement, and you've got some really powerful measurement there. You talked about building up the community. I absolutely love your program. I wanted to end on any advice that you have for someone who would be building a community from the very beginning, and then some advice for people who are looking to connect their customer advocacy programs to influencers.
Yeah, no, it's a great, 2 great questions actually. In terms of building a community from the beginning, I'm conscious of not wanting to, steal anyone's thunder, but I mean, it looks like the kind of keeping the customer focus first of all is the main thing. As in, it can't be something where you're trying to extract too much value before investing in the people. The reason why people want to stay in a community for 6 years is because you gave them many things that are incredibly valuable for them. And embodying that ethos of customer first and kind of that's a value set that you need to sort of continue with. And that sort of from the business side in terms of scaling it up and back to what I mentioned in terms of tying it to the business goals or the marketing goals, that's going to help you get the kind of investment that you need, or at least the executive buy-in, which is also really important. And in terms of connecting your advocates with influencers, I think making sure that you position it in a way to your advocates that of all the value that they're going to get from it, from a personal branding perspective, from a their own company, also just that you really value their opinion on certain topics. So hybrid work is a big focus for Cisco at the moment, and we're connecting one of our advocates with an influencer around the hybrid work topic, and we really want to hear their thoughts on that topic. So knowing that you really value their opinion and just that you hear them, you sort of you want to hear their thoughts on certain things. But I think just to close, I mean, it's really also about people, though. At least from my perspective, my leadership, the other people that I've worked with, they're very passionate people, and you need that to one, invest and build a community, but also really care about the customer. So Christina and Valeria, like I mentioned, and Nick and Rashik and Haley, who I've worked with for a long time, they're very passionate people, and building a community or working in customer advocacy definitely requires that passion.
Yeah, I think you've touched on some really amazing advice for anyone listening. And what I especially liked about it was that even though you're connecting the customer advocates with the influencers, you focused on really wanting to hear the customer opinion, because I
Yeah.
guess when a customer is speaking to a social media influencer who is an expert on the topic as well, they might seem a bit in awe of the person's authority or stature or influence on a certain network, but and so maybe it feels like it's all about the influencer, but actually it's all about the customer
Mm,
and their
mm.
opinions, and the influencer is supporting that and facilitating that and communicating the story to their networks as well, because they get value. So I love that even when you're stretching into a very sophisticated maturity of your program, that the customer voice is still the one that you want to hear, and you're focusing on that because obviously um, your values are coming through very strongly and are intrinsic to the success of the program. So thank you so much for coming to speak to us about it. It's a fascinating case study on how you're evolving a customer advocacy program that was already doing fantastically well, but is now reaching a different stage in terms of content creation and storytelling. So thank you so much for sharing what Cisco are doing.
Yeah, my pleasure. And yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been it's been great talking to you, and yeah, looking forward to continuing the partnership.
Pleasure. And if anyone wants to see any more customer chats for on Cisco, please do visit our resources section. We've got plenty of other wonderful brands who are working with influencers and sharing all of their opportunities and many advantages and success stories as well. So thanks very much, Tom, again, and look forward to seeing everyone in the next episode.